Our main character, Swagger, is the world's best shooter you can meet. He's also a patriotic American who believes that everything should be done to safeguard the country. While trying to save his country, he gets ambushed by the same people he's trying to save. Will he survive? The movie starts on a peacekeeping mission in Ethiopia. A great shooter, Bobby Lee Swagger, and his colleague Fen are sent on a peacekeeping mission to another city. Naturally, they aren't meant to be in that country, which is an illegal mission. Fen brings out a picture of his wife, Sarah, telling Swagger that Sarah has just resumed nursing school, and she was also the one who sewed her gown. He's excited at the thought of meeting his wife again, and he wonders if their mission is a peacekeeping mission. He tells Swagger his concern, asking why they're keeping peace in a place that doesn't seem peaceful and wondering if the mission is legal. Suddenly, they get a code that an illegal truck is coming through, and Swagger targets the truck and eventually shoots the sniper and the driver. He returns the call to confirm his mission is successful, only to see several truck troops with ammunition coming towards them. He immediately starts targeting all the shooters and drivers, and he kills some of them. The enemy troops start figuring out where he can hide, so he calls his supervisor to report his operation. He tells his supervisor that the enemy troops are many and that they should start an evacuation for them, but the supervisor in charge of that mission shuts down the mission. He tells the other members that they should pack up and leave. They leave Swagger and Fen in the forest with no rescue. To Swagger's shock, the enemy troops arrive with an aircraft to fish them out. This seems like a shock to Swagger, as his briefing before the mission was that the country does not have air support. He hides with Fen, and they try to call the supervisor but realize the entire communication channel has been shut down. He reassures Fen that they will survive, and he tries to shoot the aircraft. He eventually survives, but Fen dies. 3 years later, Swagger lives on the mountain with his dog Sam. He walks around the mountain, scouting for food, and returns home. Meanwhile, at the U.S. Army, his file is taken to an honorary colonel, Isaac Johnson, who talks about how great a shooter he is, and that no other shooter can match his quality. There's no official report on how that encounter 3 years ago ended, but an unofficial report states that he single-handedly handled over 70% of the troops, and the others ran. The supervisor who had left him hanging died 2 weeks after the incident, and Swagger retired a week after the incident of that. They claim they have to meet him because he is the only rescue for a mission at hand. Johnson travels with Payne and Dobler to the mountain and meets Swagger. Upon arriving, Swagger comes out and tells them to leave. He says he isn't interested in any conversations, and Payne even attempts to shoot his dog, so he threatens to kill Payne. Johnson throws his medal at Swagger and asks if he knows the medal. He also says that he knows Swagger's dad got the same award. He says he has something to tell him, and Swagger gives him an audience. Johnson tells Swagger that he wants him to plot the president's assassination. This sounds like a shock to Swagger, but Johnson tells him he's only planning it and not executing it. He's to plot the assassination so they can figure out the shooter who wants to kill the president. He reveals about how they're dissecting an anonymous letter about a team trying to kill the president. According to the letter, the president will be killed about a mile away, and there's just one person who can shoot that far, which is Swagger. The letter was sent internally, so they figured there's a lapse in the governance, so they couldn't call the real agency needed. So they needed Swagger to plot the assassination so they could figure out how the shooter would do it. Swagger says he isn't interested, but he doesn't like the president, and he doesn't care. Johnson tries to convince him and leaves him with a number to call if he changes his mind. Before leaving, Swagger pretends that he wants to snap their engine, and he snaps their plate number. On their way, Johnson says he's sure Swagger would accept the offer with a nod. They just have to sit and wait. Eventually, Swagger decides to go. He calls someone to care for his dog and takes a plane to Washington, D.C. He takes a train, checks the 3 locations the president is likely to be during the proposed assassination, and after checking it out, he returns and reports to Johnson that the only possible place the attack can take place in Philadelphia is because there is an open range for such an attack. He decides to return home, but Johnson begs him to remain there until the program because he's the only one who knows how to spot people in places like that. Trying to serve his nation, he agrees and waits until the day. On the said day, he stays at the perfect spot for the assassination spot with Johnson, who eventually introduces a local police officer, Timmons. When Swagger sees Timmons, he sees Timmons' gun is unlocked and tells Timmons to lock it. When the presidential guest from Ethiopia, Archbishop Desmond Mutombo, climbs the podium for his speech, Swagger realizes it's the perfect humidity for a shot, so he tries to alert the others to be alert, but Timmons shoots him twice. He escapes by jumping down the window, and a search begins under Johnson's command. He comes in contact with an FBI agent, Nick Memphis. He tries to convince Memphis that he's innocent, and he disarms Memphis, cuffs him, and drives away his car. As the search continues, he treats his injury and drives the car into a river. He escapes from the car and hangs onto a ship, then eventually runs. He's been announced as the one who did the assassination, so searches for him are all around the city. Timmons is announced as a hero who shot the criminal, and Memphis is also announced as an embarrassment to the FBI, so he's called for questioning. He reports that he heard Swagger say Timmons was a setup, but his superiors refuse to believe him. Swagger arrives at a store and switches off their power coverage to buy what he needs without being seen. Swagger arrives at a store and he drives to Sarah, Fenn's widow's house, and she immediately recognizes him. She tells him that he should leave, and when he convinces her, she asks him to pack his truck. When he drives away, she calls 911 but ends the call immediately. He returns and asks if she's a nurse, but she tells him that she isn't a nurse and that it was Fenn's dream. He begs her to treat his injury and gives her all she needs, so she decides to attempt it. Memphis refuses to believe that he's crazy for being defeated by Swagger. He tries to explain that Swagger can't miss a shot at the president, considering that Swagger is a trained officer who's been prepared for shoots like that. He decides to visit where the shot was taken to prove his point. He also tries to interrogate Timmons, but Timmons has been shot dead. When Swagger wakes up, Sarah tells him the government announced that he killed his dog before leaving because he knew he wasn't coming back. She reminds him that the government will find him, but he says that he has to find Memphis first. He needs to use Memphis to trick Johnson out of his hiding place. So he asks Sarah to help him meet Memphis and give him the plate number of the car Johnson used to visit him. He also causes an attack near the cafe where Sarah had met Memphis. Upon getting the picture, Memphis sneaks into the FBI computer and tracks the number, but sees it's secured and the information is hidden. He speaks to a colleague about the attack, and the colleague informs him that the video they got had been initially doctored and sent to reporting agencies. Johnson also finds out about the tracking and asks that Memphis be killed. They kidnap Memphis minutes before his disciplinary review, and they're about to kill him when Swagger rescues him. Swagger begs him to join to catch these men, and they travel to Tennessee, where they meet Mr. Raitt, a firearm expert who suggests that the only man alive who can make that shot is Serbiak, as men who do that are most likely killed after the operation. Johnson also finds out while checking Swagger's credit card that Swagger sends flowers to Sarah every year for Fenn's anniversary, so they deduce he could hide at Sarah's place, and he orders Payne to kidnap her. He also asks a senator for a helicopter with 20 shooters so he can finish Swagger. Memphis calls his colleague to help them with Serbiak's location, and they visit Serbiak. Memphis stays outside while Swagger enters and asks if it was Serbiak who made the shot at the Archbishop. Serbiak admits that he made the shot and was also approached for the job. They're all tools just like Timmons, and they would all be disposed of after the mission. He tells Swagger that the Archbishop wanted to tell the truth about the destruction of the country in Africa, which was completely destroyed with 300 bodies buried underground. The reason was because of oil that was found in the land and to warn the neighboring African city. He claims Swagger should be informed because he was the one who covered the tracks of the soldiers that went that year. Swagger realizes that the peacekeeping mission 3 years ago was to cover the tracks of their wrongdoing. Serbiak tells him that he wasn't meant to survive the attack too, but he was just stronger. It is a conglomerate that can't be stopped, and there's no head. However, Johnson gets his command from a senator named Charles. He also informs Swagger that Sarah has been kidnapped as leverage, and Memphis calls to tell Swagger that the soldiers are closing in. Serbiak reveals that he was to delay Swagger before killing himself, and he kills himself. Swagger and Memphis shoot all soldiers and escape. The following day, reports of the shooting were reported to the FBI. Although no body was found, the fingerprints of Swagger and Memphis were found. Memphis calls the FBI to report that he has Swagger in custody. The reason for this is that they believe Johnson will be listening to the conversation and he will call. As expected, Johnson calls Swagger after Memphis's call. He tries to blackmail Swagger with Sarah, but Swagger retaliates with a recording of Serbiak's confession. He also reveals he knows about Senator Charles Meacham and the bodies that were buried under the oil pumps in Africa. He asks to meet Meacham, Payne, and Johnson, and they comply. They hold Sarah as hostage, but Swagger kills all the snipers that they've brought and also shoots Payne in the hand to release Sarah. Angrily, Sarah takes the gun and kills Payne. Swagger walks there and tries to negotiate. Meacham tells him that the game is rigged against Swagger and that no matter how much Swagger tries, many people are involved. Memphis also sends an anonymous message to his superior at work with their location, and the FBI starts coming. Swagger plays the recording of Michial's conversation, but sets it on fire because he knows that as long as the recording exists, they will always find him. Johnson tells him that he has lost, and Meacham walks away before the FBI arrives. The FBI arrests Swagger, and he speaks to the committee, sometime later explaining that his gun wasn't used for the shot, but he shot the bullets at a can about a week before the incident, and the bullet was taken for the crime. Memphis also shows pictures of the people killed by Johnson and his associates of Africa, but the FBI can't sue Johnson for that since the crime was committed outside the U.S. Johnson leaves for the meeting, telling Swagger that he has won again. Sometime later, Johnson, Meacham, and their associate meet in Ecuador. Johnson attacks them, kills them all, and sets the building on fire before walking away to meet Sarah in a car, and they drive off as the movie ends.